What if the most attractive man in the room wasn't the richest, not the loudest, not the most handsome, not the one wearing the expensive watch? Imagine two men walking into the same room. One arrives in a luxury car, his clothes are flawless, his confidence is loud enough to fill the silence. The other arrives quietly, no designer labels, no dramatic entrance. He simply walks in, calm, present, completely comfortable with himself. Hours later, people barely remember the first man, but they can't stop thinking about the second. Why? This question has puzzled philosophers, psychologists, and poets for centuries, because attraction has always been stranger than we imagine. Money can buy attention, but attention isn't admiration. Status can create curiosity, but curiosity isn't connection. Real attraction lives somewhere deeper, somewhere ancient, somewhere the human brain learned millions of years before banks, luxury brands, or social media ever existed. And that's where Stoicism enters the story, not as a dating trick, not as manipulation, but as a philosophy that quietly shapes a person's character. The Stoics never, "How do I make people like me?" they asked. "How do I become someone worthy of respect?" Ironically, that answer often creates attraction as a side effect. But here's the strange part. Most people misunderstand why. They think confidence is about acting fearless. They think strength means dominating every conversation. They think mystery means pretending not to care. The ancient Stoics believed almost the opposite, and modern psychology is beginning to agree. Hidden beneath thousands of years of philosophy and hundreds of scientific studies are 6 qualities that consistently leave a deeper impression than money ever could. None of them can be purchased. None of them can be faked for very long, and every one of them changes the way people feel in your presence. The first seems almost invisible until you notice that every unforgettable person possesses it. Imagine standing beside a mountain during a storm. The wind screams, trees bend, rain crashes against the rocks, yet the mountain doesn't negotiate with the weather. It simply remains. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the mind can become like a fortress, not because nothing attacks it, but because nothing unnecessary enters it. This brings us to the first quality, emotional steadiness. Most people confuse emotions with reactions. They're not the same. Feeling anger isn't weakness. Exploding because of anger is. Feeling fear isn't failure. Being controlled by fear is. Imagine a couple sitting in traffic. Someone cuts them off. One person slams the steering wheel, shouts, curses. The next 20 minutes are poisoned. The other simply exhales, adjusts the mirror, keeps driving. The traffic hasn't changed, but the emotional climate has. Here's something fascinating. Researchers studying emotional regulation have repeatedly found that calm behavior under stress tends to increase perceptions of competence, reliability, and maturity. Not because calm people never feel stress, because they recover from it faster. The human brain constantly asks one silent question. Are you safe? It asks this question about places, jobs, friends, relationships, even strangers. People who remain emotionally grounded often communicate safety without saying a single word. Not physical safety alone, psychological safety. The feeling that chaos won't spread simply because life became difficult. That matters far more than most realize. Think about history. During great crises, people rarely followed whoever panicked first. They followed whoever stayed composed. During wars, economic collapse, natural disasters, the calm leader often became the emotional anchor for everyone else. This isn't coincidence, it's biology. Our nervous systems constantly read one another. Psychologists sometimes call this emotional contagion. One anxious person can raise the tension of an entire room. One calm person can lower it. The Stoics discovered this long before neuroscience gave it a name. Epictetus warned that events themselves rarely destroy peace. Our judgments about those events usually do. Now imagine carrying that principle into everyday life. An argument, a misunderstanding, a delayed message, a canceled plan. Most people instantly create stories. They don't respect me. They're losing interest. I've failed. The Stoic pauses, questions the story, separates fact from imagination. That pause changes everything because reactions reveal habits, responses reveal character. But then there's another layer almost nobody notices. Calm isn't attractive because it looks impressive. It's attractive because it makes everyone nearby breathe easier. Imagine entering a room where one person desperately seeks approval. Every sentence sounds rehearsed. Every laugh feels forced. Every compliment carries hidden expectations. Now imagine someone else. Relaxed, listening more than speaking. Never rushing, never chasing attention. Their silence somehow feels louder than everyone else's words. Why? Because genuine calm removes pressure. People naturally move toward environments that require less emotional effort. This explains something that seems almost unfair. The quieter person often becomes the most memorable. Silence is magic, because emotional stability creates space for other people to exist comfortably. The ancient Stoics understood this. Modern neuroscience continues discovering why it works. But emotional steadiness alone isn't enough. A mountain can stand still forever and still never inspire anyone. There is another quality, one even rarer, one that quietly separates admired people from merely impressive ones. And strangely, it begins with something almost everyone avoids: discomfort. Picture two young men waking before sunrise. Both have the same dream, the same ambition, the same intelligence. One waits until motivation arrives. The other gets out of bed anyway. A year later, their lives barely resemble each other. The difference wasn't talent, it wasn't luck, it wasn't money. It was discipline. Not the harsh discipline of punishment, the quiet discipline of keeping promises to yourself. Here's an uncomfortable truth. The human brain loves immediate rewards. Thousands of years ago, that instinct helped people survive. Eat the fruit now, take shelter now, escape danger now. The future wasn't guaranteed. Today, the same brain scrolls endlessly, avoids difficult conversations, delays important work, chooses comfort over growth, except comfort has a hidden cost. Every time someone abandons a promise to themselves, something invisible weakens. Self-trust. Imagine telling yourself, I'll start tomorrow. Then tomorrow arrives, nothing changes. You repeat the promise again, again, again. Eventually, your own mind stops believing you. This creates an invisible fracture. Confidence isn't destroyed overnight. It's eroded one broken promise at a time. The Stoics knew this. Musonius Rufus believed character wasn't built by occasional acts of greatness. It was built through repeated habits, tiny actions done consistently. Modern psychology echoes the same idea. Identity often follows behavior, not the other way around. People think, I'll become disciplined once I feel confident. More often, confidence appears after disciplined action. Imagine a sculptor striking marble. One hit changes almost nothing. 10 hits seem equally meaningless. 100, still little. But eventually, a face appears from the stone. People admire the final masterpiece. They never applaud the thousands of invisible strikes that created it. Discipline works exactly the same way. It is invisible until suddenly it isn't. Here's something remarkable. People instinctively notice consistency, not consciously, subconsciously. Someone who exercises regularly, keeps their word, shows up on time, finishes difficult tasks, remains reliable month after month. They communicate something powerful without speaking. I can be trusted. Trust has always been one of the rarest currencies in human history, far rarer than money. Money can disappear overnight. Character rarely does. But the real mystery was only beginning, because discipline changes something deeper than behavior. It changes presence. Think of professional musicians, elite athletes, experienced surgeons, seasoned pilots. Their movements appear effortless, almost graceful. What looks like natural talent is usually disciplined repetition hidden beneath years of practice. People often mistake calm mastery for giftedness. They're seeing discipline wearing an invisible mask. This creates a strange paradox. The more disciplined someone becomes, the less they need to prove themselves, because competence speaks quietly. Incompetence often shouts. And that brings us to another question. Why do some people constantly seek validation, while others seem completely free from it? The answer has almost nothing to do with confidence, and everything to do with where they look for approval. That single difference has shaped emperors, destroyed kingdoms, and quietly transformed countless ordinary lives. And it may be the most attractive quality of all. Imagine carrying a cup filled to the very edge. Every step becomes stressful, every bump feels dangerous, every unexpected movement threatens to spill everything. Now imagine another cup, half full, steady, easy to carry. The difference isn't the weight, it's the dependence. Many people move through life carrying their self-worth like that overflowing cup. One compliment, they feel unstoppable. One criticism, they question everything. One ignored message, their confidence collapses. One rejection, their identity shatters. The Stoics saw this long before psychology gave it a name. They believed the greatest prison was allowing your peace to depend on things you could never fully control. And perhaps nothing is less controllable than another person's opinion. This brings us to the third quality, a man who does not depend on validation, not because he rejects love, not because he avoids people, but because his value doesn't fluctuate with applause. Imagine an ancient Roman marketplace, merchants shouting, crowds arguing, politicians making impossible promises, poets chasing recognition, soldiers displaying medals, everyone trying to be seen. Now picture Marcus Aurelius walking through that same chaos, the most powerful man in the empire, yet every evening he reminded himself of one uncomfortable truth. Fame disappears, praise fades, even emperors become dust. If an emperor could question the value of public approval, why do so many people today spend hours chasing likes from strangers? Here's the strange part. The more desperately someone seeks approval, the less secure they appear, not because approval is wrong, because desperation is visible. People sense it before words are even spoken. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as neediness, not financial need, emotional need, the constant search for reassurance. Do you still like me? Am I enough? Did I say something wrong? These questions are rarely spoken aloud, but they echo through behavior, over-explaining, constant texting, showing off, trying too hard, agreeing with everything, laughing at jokes that aren't funny, changing opinions just to fit in. Each action quietly whispers, I need you to approve of me. Ironically, approval becomes harder to earn, because confidence cannot survive constant negotiation. Now imagine someone different. They listen carefully, speak honestly, accept disagreement, walk away from disrespect without creating drama. If someone misunderstands them, they explain once, not 20 times. If someone leaves, they don't chase. They continue living with purpose. That kind of stability feels rare, because it is. Here's why. The human brain naturally respects people who appear guided by internal principles rather than external reactions. It's a signal of psychological maturity. Think about history. Some of the greatest reformers were mocked before they were admired. Socrates, Galileo, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr. If they had built their identity on immediate approval, their work might never have survived. Stoicism teaches something uncomfortable. If your peace depends on everyone's agreement, you'll never know peace. But if your values guide your actions, approval becomes a bonus, not a necessity. And strangely, people often admire those who don't constantly seek admiration, but there is an important distinction. This isn't emotional distance. It isn't arrogance. It isn't pretending not to care. True independence still allows kindness, still welcomes connection, still appreciates love. The difference is simple. Love becomes something shared, not something begged for. That changes everything. Because relationships built on fear eventually become exhausting. Relationships built on mutual respect become peaceful. But then, another mystery appears. Some people possess incredible confidence, yet they still struggle to build lasting attraction. Why? Because confidence without empathy often becomes ego, and ego eventually reveals itself. The next quality is quieter, less obvious, yet it may be the one remembered years later. It begins with listening. Picture two conversations. In the first, one person dominates every minute. Every story becomes about them. Every silence makes them uncomfortable. They interrupt, they correct, they compete. When the conversation ends, you remember almost nothing they said, only how tired you felt. Now imagine another conversation. Someone asks a simple question, then waits, really waits. No interruption, no rush to impress, no rehearsed response, just attention. Something unexpected happens. You begin sharing thoughts you didn't know you had. You leave thinking, that was one of the best conversations I've ever had. But here's the surprise. You spoke most of the time. This is the fourth quality, the ability to make others feel seen. Modern neuroscience offers an interesting clue. When people feel deeply understood, areas of the brain associated with safety and reward become more active. Being heard isn't merely pleasant, it's psychologically regulating. Now think about how rare that experience has become. Phones vibrate, notifications interrupt, everyone waits for their turn to speak. Very few people truly listen. The Stoics believed wisdom begins by observing before reacting. Epictetus famously advised having 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen twice as much as you speak, not as a technique, as a discipline. Imagine entering a quiet forest. You don't immediately hear everything. First the wind, then birds, then leaves moving. The longer you remain silent, the more details appear. People work the same way. The more patiently you listen, the more someone reveals. Not because you're extracting information, because you're creating safety. Here's the fascinating part. People often assume charismatic individuals are exceptional speakers. Research suggests another possibility. Many highly charismatic people are exceptional listeners. They make conversations feel important, not because they perform, because they pay attention. Attention has become one of the most valuable gifts in the modern world. It cannot be purchased, only offered. Think about the people you've never forgotten. Chances are they remembered small details. They noticed your mood. They asked thoughtful questions. They didn't rush to solve every problem. Sometimes they simply stayed present. Presence sounds ordinary until you realize how uncommon it is. Imagine sitting across from someone who checks their phone every 30 seconds. Now imagine someone who places it face down, looks directly at you, listens without distraction. The difference feels enormous, not because of words, because attention communicates value. It silently says, "For this moment, you matter." That message reaches places compliments never can. But listening alone isn't enough. Anyone can stay quiet for a few minutes. The real challenge begins after life becomes difficult, because eventually everyone faces disappointment, failure, loss, rejection, betrayal, and in those moments, a person's true character is revealed. Some become bitter, others become stronger. What creates that difference? The answer isn't talent, it isn't intelligence, it isn't luck, it is resilience. And resilience has a secret most people never discover until it's too late. Imagine 2 oak trees standing through the same storm. One is rigid, it refuses to bend. The other sways with every violent gust. When morning comes, only one is still standing. Strength was never about refusing to move, it was about knowing when to bend. That lesson would shape the next quality. And once understood, it changes the way every setback is seen. The storm doesn't ask who deserves it. It doesn't care who prepared the most. It arrives anyway. One phone call, one unexpected goodbye, one failed business, one betrayal, one diagnosis, one moment, and an entire future can disappear. Most people believe these moments create character. The Stoics believed something different. They reveal it. This is the 5th quality. Resilience, not the loud kind that announces itself, not the dramatic speeches, not pretending nothing hurts. Real resilience is quieter than that. Imagine a blacksmith standing beside a furnace. A glowing piece of steel rests inside the fire. The heat is unbearable. The hammer strikes again and again. Each blow seems destructive, yet every strike is shaping something stronger. The steel isn't becoming powerful despite the pressure. It's becoming powerful because of it. Human beings are surprisingly similar. The moments that feel like they're breaking us often become the moments that rebuild us. But here's where everything changes. Most people ask the wrong question when life becomes painful. Why is this happening to me? The Stoic asks, what is this trying to teach me? One question creates helplessness, the other creates growth. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, noticed something extraordinary. People could lose almost everything. Their possessions, their freedom, even their families. Yet one thing remained, the freedom to choose their response. That single realization became the foundation of his philosophy. Between what happens and how we respond, there is a space. Inside that space lives our greatest power. The Stoics had been teaching the same lesson nearly 2,000 years earlier. Nothing outside you controls your character, unless you allow it to. Imagine 2 climbers on the same mountain. The wind is equally cold, the path equally dangerous. One complains about every obstacle, the other quietly adapts. The mountain hasn't changed, only the meaning they assign to it. This isn't toxic positivity. Stoicism never asks people to deny pain. Marcus Aurelius grieved. Seneca experienced exile. Epictetus lived as a slave. Their lives were filled with hardship. They simply refused to let hardship become their identity. There's a profound difference. Pain is inevitable. Victimhood is not. Think about the people history remembers. Nelson Mandela, Harriet Tubman, Helen Keller. They were not admired because life was easy. They were admired because life wasn't. Resilience leaves evidence, not in words, in choices. Someone who keeps their integrity after betrayal, someone who continues showing kindness after disappointment, someone who rebuilds after failure without becoming bitter. That kind of strength cannot be borrowed. It must be earned. Here's the fascinating part. Psychologists studying post-traumatic growth have found that many people emerge from adversity with deeper gratitude, stronger relationships, and a clearer sense of purpose. Not everyone, but enough to reveal an important truth. Suffering can shrink a person or expand them. The deciding factor often isn't the event itself, it's the meaning they create afterward. Imagine a potter shaping clay. Every press seems to distort it until suddenly a beautiful vessel appears. Without pressure, the shape never exists. Life works the same way. The greatest version of ourselves is often hidden beneath the greatest challenges. But resilience has an enemy, an invisible one: comfort. Comfort whispers, stay where it's safe. Don't risk embarrassment. Don't try. Don't fail. Slowly, comfort becomes a cage decorated to look like a home. The Stoics warned against becoming addicted to ease, not because comfort is evil, because dependence on comfort makes people fragile. Imagine never lifting anything heavy, never facing cold weather, never hearing criticism, never experiencing rejection. The smallest difficulty eventually feels overwhelming. Strength grows only where resistance exists. The body knows this. The mind does too. Muscles weaken without use. Character follows the same law. This is why resilient people often carry an unusual peace, not because they've avoided suffering, because they've survived enough to know suffering doesn't last forever. When you've walked through darkness, ordinary fears lose much of their power. But then, another mystery emerges. If resilience builds strength, why do some resilient people still push others away? Why do some become emotionally unavailable? Why do others become compassionate? The answer lies in the final quality, and it may be the most misunderstood of them all. Picture an old oak tree standing alone in an open field. Its roots run deep, its trunk is solid, its branches stretch toward the sky. It never shouts about its strength. It simply offers shade. Birds build nests in its branches, travelers rest beneath it, children climb it. The tree asks for nothing, yet everyone benefits from its presence. This is the sixth quality: quiet purpose, a life directed by meaning rather than ego. Many people spend years asking, how can I become more attractive? The Stoics ask something much deeper. What kind of person am I becoming? Those two questions lead to entirely different lives. Imagine waking up every morning focused only on impressing other people. Every decision becomes exhausting. Every outfit is calculated. Every conversation becomes a performance. Now imagine waking with a mission larger than yourself. Building something, serving others, mastering a craft, protecting a family, creating beauty, seeking wisdom. Suddenly, attention becomes secondary. Purpose takes its place. Here's the irony. People often become more interesting the moment they stop trying to appear interesting, because genuine purpose creates quiet confidence. Think about history's great craftsmen. The violin maker carefully carving wood, the monk copying ancient manuscripts by candlelight, the scientist spending decades chasing one unanswered question. They weren't driven by applause, they were driven by meaning. Meaning has a gravity that status cannot imitate. Modern psychology supports this idea. People who pursue intrinsic goals, growth, contribution, mastery, and relationships tend to experience greater long-term well-being than those driven primarily by money, fame, or image. Money matters. It provides security. It opens opportunities. Stoicism never argued otherwise. But money is a tool, not an identity. The problem begins when a person's entire value depends on what they own. Imagine two homes, one built on stone, the other built on sand. Both appear beautiful under clear skies. Only the storm reveals the difference. Purpose is the stone. Status is often the sand. When careers change, when wealth disappears, when trends fade, purpose remains. That's why some people remain deeply respected long after their titles vanish. Their identity was never tied to a paycheck. It was tied to their principles, and principles travel wherever they go. Consider the life of Marcus Aurelius once more. Despite ruling the most powerful empire of his age, his private journal rarely celebrated wealth or victory. Instead, he reminded himself to be just, patient, humble, useful. He knew something many still forget. Power without character eventually destroys itself. Character without power still changes lives. Imagine meeting someone 20 years from now. They won't remember the price of your watch. They won't remember the logo on your shoes. They probably won't remember the car you drove, but they will remember how they felt around you, whether they felt respected, whether they felt safe, whether they felt inspired to become better. That emotional memory lasts longer than any possession. This is why the 6 qualities connect like pieces of a single puzzle. Emotional steadiness gives peace. Discipline builds self-trust. Freedom from validation creates independence. Deep listening creates connection. Resilience transforms suffering into wisdom. Purpose gives every step direction. Separate, they are valuable. Together, they form something much greater. Not the image of a perfect man, but the foundation of a deeply grounded one. And perhaps that's the greatest misunderstanding of all. The goal was never to become irresistible, because people are wonderfully different. No single set of traits guarantees attraction, and every person values different qualities. The real goal is to become someone whose character remains intact regardless of who is watching. Ironically, that is often the kind of person others naturally trust, respect, and feel drawn toward. In the end, Stoicism offers no shortcuts, no manipulation, no secret formula. It offers something far more difficult and far more rewarding, a way of living that cannot be taken away by rejection, a confidence that survives failure, a calm that outlasts chaos, a purpose that outlives applause. Imagine standing once more at the beginning of this journey. 2 men enter the same room. One carries wealth, the other carries character. Money may capture the first glance, character earns the second, and the second glance is the one people remember. Long after the room is empty, long after the conversation ends, long after the lights go out, because true strength has never needed to announce itself. It simply becomes impossible to ignore.